Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Marshall Swatt. I'm the CEO of Swatt Data. The title of this webinar is Using Blockchain Data to Make More Profitable Trades and Investment Decisions. The expected length of this webinar and talk is about 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm happy to give like about 15 minutes or so for a Q&A. For those of you that would like to stay and ask questions afterwards, you're welcome to do so. You know, if we need more time, that's fine as well. But I want to keep this kind of short and very to the point for everybody and be as efficient as possible. The intended audience for this webinar is basically for traders and investors in blockchain instruments. So that would be cryptocurrencies, tokens or fungible tokens, as well as derivatives instruments. People who are essentially actively trading these kinds of instruments, or people who are making, you know, sizable investments in these instruments. If you aren't analyzing these markets, trading or investing full time in these instruments, then this webinar may not be optimal for you. But that's going to be our kind of focus and target for today. I'll be demoing our debut product, which is Swatt Data. We released it about a month ago, and it's currently in a beta release. Essentially, the Swatt Data is a blockchain data and analytics platform. We make it easy to obtain and analyze the data underlying blockchain and token networks, and we provide it at a fraction of the cost of doing it in-house. Our current release provides over 4,000 metrics in a time series format, covering 14 blockchains and over 200 ERC20 tokens. This data is available both via a charting web interface that I'll be showing today, as well as via API in both JSON and CSV formats. We offer a freemium pricing model with both individual and enterprise pricing tiers for our customers, primarily based on usage. So let's get started. Briefly, I just want to tell you a little bit about me and the company. My background is I've got over 20 years as a software engineer in finance. I worked at Citigroup as part of the team that built their institutional foreign currency exchange called Citi Velocity FX. I left Citi and co-founded CoinSetter, a Bitcoin exchange out of New York, in 2013. We had the fortune of being one of the early firms to acquire a company in the blockchain space before selling the combined company to Kraken in January of 2016. And after selling CoinSetter, I spent some time looking at the space and really was eager to continue to be involved in blockchain. And we ended up raising funding and starting a new company as in January of this year that is called Swatt Data. So the market for data is a pretty sizable one. If you look at companies like Bloomberg and Reuters, it's a pretty big industry. Companies require data in order to make informed trading and investing decisions. Our thesis is that companies will equally require blockchain data in order to price, trade, and invest in blockchain instruments, just as they do in many other financial markets today. So, what is the core problem that Swatt Data solves in the market? What are we doing for our customers? Well, the first core problem we solve is that data is needed in today's world in order to make trading decisions. There are many different types of traders in the markets today, from market makers to static arbitrage traders to high-frequency algo traders to quantitative analysis and trading firms, crypto hedge funds, you name it. It's a wide array of market participants, but what they all share in common is that they need data, and they use data, analyze data as part of their strategies for trading successfully and making successful investments in the market. But when it comes to the blockchain space, market data is really the only type of data that's readily available in today's world. Customers don't have easy access to other forms of data, and in many cases, they're not even aware that other kinds of data exists. That could play a crucial role in trading and investing. And some examples of that are, blockchain network data about what's actually happening on blockchain networks like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum, as well as metrics and analyses of the data on these networks. Things like the token fee revenue of a network or the valuation of a network based on its transaction activity or its behavior, as well as monitoring certain statistics like the difficulty rate, the reward fees, and the hash rate of a network. So we help solve that problem by actually sourcing and providing this kind of data. The other problem is that this data is not easy to obtain. It's both costly and difficult for customers. And in fact, the in-house cost of your average crypto or quant firm trying to source this data themselves is quite substantial. It could easily top $100,000 a month in terms of hosting fees, engineering teams, staffing fees, and operational fees. These blockchain networks all run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with no holiday. They're all built on very customized node software. In some cases, that software isn't very robust or very mature. It's very alpha grade at best. And so it's unreliable, it's unstable. It has a lot of bugs and a lot of issues. These networks often take a substantial amount of time, measured in days or weeks, in order to sync and get them up and running, in order to provide data and connect to the networks that they belong. And a lot of, and what people also don't quite understand is that there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done to actually extract data off of these networks, structure it, and put it in a format that's easy for somebody to analyze and use. So, our business really focuses on solving those two problems for customers. So what are the main benefits that we offer in our product is we provide one single API, one interface that provides access to all these blockchain networks, all these different tokens that exist. We also provide market data from exchanges via our API as well. In the case of the blockchain data that we provide, we have full histories going back to the beginning of time for these networks and for the metrics that we provide on them, as well as real-time data and advanced charting interfaces. So that's just a list of kind of some of the overview features of our product. I'm going to skip ahead here to a couple other slides. I don't want to go through this in depth, but I've told you a little bit about myself. My colleague Jerry Simon is our CTO. He's got several decades of engineering experience as well, building scalable systems, low latency systems, data processing systems. You can find us at www.swatt.com. We also have a blog. We've posted a number of articles on our blog at blog.swatt.com, many of which talk about Swatt Data and some of the features and capabilities that it has. You can get to Swatt Data directly from our homepage just by clicking any of the links that we have. And when you do, you will end up on our login page. It's very easy to get started. We have a link that says create user account. We ask for 4 pieces of data, that's all. Just your name, your email, the name of your company. We will generate a random password for you when you create the account, and you'll be good to go. If I log in here, it takes you to the standard interface for Swatt Data. And you can see here, this is the main view that users have from the user interface perspective. At the top here, we have the main navigation. And also here to the right, which I'll talk about a little later, is sharing options and the ability to share charts and embed charts. And then we also have our main navigation for creating and generating charts based on all the metrics that we have. It's very easy to do. And as you can see, our first drop-down lists the different blockchain networks that we support. At the moment, we've got 14 listed here from the most, and all of these are basically the top networks by market cap in the industry. So the common networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as secondary networks like Bitcoin Cash and Ether Classic, well-known kind of privacy networks like Monero and Zcash, and even networks that are proof of stake based, such as Stratus and Neo. We also provide information on Ethereum tokens too, and we have quite a substantial list of Ethereum token networks and tokens that you can display. For a given network, we have a series of metrics that are available that can be plotted. And the beauty of our interface and our system is that you can compare and contrast any two networks that you want that are available across any of the blockchains that we provide. All right, so now let's start by diving in and having a look at the data itself. I'm gonna, to make this easy, I'm gonna just kind of show some static charts and cycle through them. But I'll be showing a number of charts that give you a taste of the data sets that we provide and how they could add value in analyzing these networks and these instruments. So the first chart we're showing is comparing transaction activity across just 4 of the top blockchain networks. We have Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin. And you can mouse over these charts at any point and you can see the relationship or the numeric value of these networks at any given point in time. So if we look back in December and January, you can see that during the time when the market was at its peak in terms of market cap and price, both the Bitcoin network and Ethereum and many other networks reached peaks in terms of their transaction activity. Bitcoin hit a peak in late December of almost 500,000 transactions in a given day. Ethereum peaked at around 1.3 million transactions a day in early January. What's kind of revealing about this time series chart is that, you know, since then, Ethereum's transaction activity has declined along with many of the other networks. It's currently down just around or just under 500,000. Bitcoin's also, you know, declined from a high of 500,000 into the as low as 150,000 or so. But it has, you know, in large part held very steady, and in fact has actually been gradually rising since the lows in January. And it oscillates. Most of these networks oscillate in terms of their daily transaction volume. In the case of Bitcoin, it's anywhere from a low of 200 to the high close to 300,000 a day in transactions. But what these charts also help reveal, what this data helps reveal, is the accuracy about what's happening on these networks, because there's certainly a lot of talk and a lot of hype about networks claiming that they are, you know, the high volume networks, the low latency networks, and so forth. But the best way to really know, and in often cases the only way to really know, is by looking at the actual data. And that's what our product lets you do. So in the case of, say, Bitcoin Cash, which has been touting from day one as being the high volume, low latency transaction network, we can clearly see here that on average throughout Bitcoin Cash's history, it's never done even 10% of the average daily volume of Bitcoin itself. If I plotted Ethereum Classic, which, you know, could easily be done here, you would see that the same is the case for Ether Classic. Now, that's not to say that those networks aren't potentially don't potentially have a future, or that they aren't maybe, you know, providing certain benefits, but it just makes it clear from looking at the data where they sit with respect to other networks in the industry. So that's a chart that shows transaction activity. Now let's move to another chart that shows that focuses on Bitcoin. This chart is showing 4 time series illustrations of Bitcoin's closing price along with the average fee per transaction that's paid to book a transaction on the Bitcoin network, as well as the transaction count for Bitcoin, which we just looked at a moment ago, and also the monetary velocity of Bitcoin, which is the amount of Bitcoin, the notional amount of Bitcoin that's transacted on the Bitcoin network on a daily basis relative to the total supply of money of Bitcoin itself in circulation. And so these time series metrics are very interesting. When we look at this chart, what you can see, and it is a little bit difficult. So maybe what I'll do here is I'll do a quick plot of the fee per transaction dynamically against the price and just simplify it by taking away 2 of those other metrics. So what you see here is the average fee per transaction paid on the Bitcoin network versus the price. And any quant trader, any trade analyst looking at this chart is going to see some very interesting information here. This chart clearly shows a very strong correlation with spikes or rises in fees paid to book transactions with the network that often precede upward movements in the price of Bitcoin. I mean, this is, I think, one of the most interesting charts that talks about the value of blockchain network data in making trading decisions. But you can see clearly back in November, as well as in December, that there were big upswings, and as well as in late December, big upswings in Bitcoin's, the fees paid to book transactions ahead of big movements. Again, here in February, in late February, March, and so forth, as well as in June. And what's interesting is we can also see that it's been a very quiet period for the last month or so. So this is a really interesting visual chart that shows maybe in a very clear way how certain data sets can have very strong correlations or associations. If we go back to this original view, we can add back the transaction count and the monetary velocity, and you can see some other really valuable data here. I think one of the most telling things about this chart is the line in green, which shows that the transaction activity on the Bitcoin network has been holding very stable since January and even increasing. Moving to another chart here. This one compares the fee per transaction paid on 4 of the top networks, the average fees paid on those networks. So we can see Bitcoin's fees versus Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin. And again, these are separated out on separate axes, so it can be a little confusing. The top by color doesn't always mean it's the top by numeric value. But what is interesting is this helps you see trends. You can see by this chart that Ether, for example, is seeing a gradual increase in the fees paid to book transactions on the network relative to other networks. Now that can be extremely valuable data that relates to the transaction volume on the network, as well as the valuation of that network, which would then affect the price of that network's token, the Ethereum token. And there, of course, have been a lot of issues in the past few months about the Ether network getting overloaded and not being able to handle increasing transaction volume. Well, the fact that the fee per transaction is going up is a strong indication that that is in fact the case. Moving on, we can look at another important metric, which is the difficulty rate of that network. Very similar, the hash rate, which you may be more familiar with, is actually directly derived from the difficulty rate of a given network. Here we're just plotting the difficulty rate for 3 networks, Bitcoin, Ether, and Litecoin. What's very interesting about this chart is you can clearly see that over just the 1-year or the 2-year history that we're showing, Bitcoin has exhibited a very steady, even increase in its difficulty rate over time, which means a very steady increase in the rate of investment in mining hardware going into growing the Bitcoin network. Versus in the case of Ether and Litecoin, we have much more variability and a less steady rate of increase in the difficulty or the amount of hardware that's being allocated to these networks. The next chart I want to briefly show you is comparing Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. I touched on that a moment ago, but here you can see there's a significant gap both in the transaction volume between these two networks, as well as the fee revenue generated on the Bitcoin Cash network relative to the Bitcoin network. On average, Bitcoin Cash is doing at most 10% of the volume, and only about 1/5 of the fee revenue of the Bitcoin network on a given day. We could also compare Ethereum and Ethereum Classic and look at their network activity. Here we're graphing again a chart showing the transaction counts of the two networks in blue and red, as well as the average fee per transaction of the given networks in green and orange. And you have similar kind of information here as well, showing that on average, Ether Classic isn't doing even 10% of the transaction volume of Ether, and its revenue is substantially lower than Ether as well. What's also, I mean, on a more quantitative basis, or a kind of a more detailed basis, you can certainly zoom in on this data, and you can tease out you know, some valuable information to see if there's spikes in certain activity. Do those spikes correlate to movements in the price? Do they correlate with news events? Do they correlate with other kinds of events, such as maybe the testing of a new feature or the rollout of a major new release? And this kind of data will often correlate or corroborate those kinds of events. All right, so another chart that I briefly want to mention is the money velocity of a few networks. I touched on that a little while ago. Here I'm showing the money velocity for some other networks that are kind of in the top 15, Stratus, Dash, Lisk, Monero, and Neo. What's interesting about this view is, you know, there's been a lot of talk about how Dash is being adopted in Venezuela and a few other countries. And what this chart reveals that's kind of interesting is that the monetary velocity of Dash is substantially higher than many other networks, even Bitcoin. On any given day, around 15% of the supply of Dash currency is traded on the Dash network. And that's an interesting statistic, because that means, in a sense, that Dash, more than almost any other of the top cryptocurrencies, is the one that's most behaving like a real currency. Lastly, another chart I want to show is a chart of Monero. This is just showing 5 of some of the top metrics for Monero, things like, again, transaction activity, fees, money velocity, and so forth. Many people think that because certain blockchain networks have built in a lot of privacy and anonymity, that there's very little data to get, but that's not actually the case. There's still a lot of data that we can pull off these networks, put into a time series format, and make available for analysis. That applies to Monero. It also applies to Zcash. And of course, you know, we have networks that are proof of, work, but we also have networks that are proof of stake. And even though a network might be proof of stake in the case of Stratus or Neo, that still means there's a lot of very valuable data that's available, that can be mined, that can be analyzed, and pulled off these networks. Here we're showing a chart of 4 of the metrics from Stratus. You can, you know, clearly see some activity in terms of the fees paid on the network, transaction activity on the network, and also money velocity. All right, so if I go back to our live view here, I just want to touch on some of the features that are also part of our overall product offering. So by default, you have this chart builder view that we make available. In addition, we've integrated the product with TradingView. I know a lot of traders out there are very familiar with using TradingView and its interfaces. So we provide the TradingView charts and all of their functionality and analytical tools, and make those available as well. And I mentioned earlier that we have an API that customers can use to connect to our product. And all of the data that we've made available, or that I've been showing you today in the charts, is available directly via our API. I'm very proud of the quality of the API that we've built. as well as the quality of the documentation that we provide. We've had a number of customers review it, market makers, people who've been in the space for a number of years. And a couple people have given me feedback that our API is better than just about any exchanges API or any other API in the industry that they've had to work with. So very proud about what we've built. I mean, I've built several APIs in my career, so I've definitely learned a thing or two about how to separate a robust, high quality API from one that's really hard to deal with or very difficult. Documentation is very important, and so is just the quality of the API and its feature set. All right. Another thing I want to mention is, or another feature, a couple features I want to quickly touch on, is the ability to save a chart. You can construct a chart, a dynamic chart that plots any kind of information or metric sets that you want. Just randomly here, I'm going to grab some metrics. Once they're graphed, you can click Save Chart. You can give it a name. I'll just call this Bitcoin Dash. I'll save it. It'll go into my Saved Charts view, and at any time I want, I can pull up a saved chart, view the chart and the data. I can even edit the chart, add to it, and do as I please. Another very helpful feature, one that we're really happy about, is the ability to share charts. And so we've built in the ability to directly share a chart in LinkedIn and Twitter. I can simply click on a Twitter link and it will pop up. It will display a pop-up. I can tweet that out, and the embedded tweet itself will have a static image of the chart embedded directly in the tweet. In addition, I can just click on a share this link, and I can get a URL that I can copy and paste into an email. I can also get a static image that I can save to my desktop. I could embed that image in an article, in a Word document, and do as I please. So we make this, we try to provide and make this very easy for our customers to use. And with that, I think that wraps up this demo for Swatt Data. As a little teaser, I just want to show you a preview of what the new upcoming version of the Swatt Data interface is going to look like. These are some screenshots of the new design that effectively are just going to make it more robust, easier to use, more user-friendly with different color schemes and color scheme views, and the ability to display and hide different elements to give users maximum view of the data itself. All right, so what else is in the works with Swatt Data? Well, we're aggressively working to add additional data to the product. NVT ratio, Metcalfe valuation, currency valuation ratios are already underway. We expect to roll those out in the next couple of weeks. We are also working to get wallet transaction data for things like whale wallet addresses and exchange wallet addresses to provide transaction data and monitoring of those interesting addresses. We will be making that available in the near future. We are currently integrating Binance's exchange market data, both historic and real-time market data feeds, and we'll be making those available most likely within the next month. And then we're actively exploring other data sets as well that customers have told us about or expressed interest in. So where are we going? Well, our focus is adding more data, making it easy for customers to connect to one API and get blockchain data, token data, market data, and other wallet data, and other classes of data via one simple API, one simple charting interface. So with that, I'd like to wrap up our webinar. Thank you very much for participating. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, that anybody may have at this time. Feel free to type those questions in to the interface here, and we can go from there. And again, thanks for your patience. I know that looks like I've gone over by a little bit more than I expected. So I have one question, which is, can we use Swatt Data's APIs to perform back testing? The answer is yes. We do provide, as I mentioned earlier, complete histories. So if you want to look at the difficulty rate of Bitcoin or Ether, the money velocity, any of these metrics, you can get the metric all the way back to the date of origin of that network. So in the case of Bitcoin, you can go back 8+ years. In the case of Ether, you can go all the way back to when the Ether network debuted. As well as in the case of Dash and Stratus and Monero and so forth. Another question is, can you discuss how your product differentiates from Coinmetrics? So, Coinmetrics is interesting. I've talked with the owners of Coinmetrics. They themselves are quant guys. They built Coinmetrics primarily because they saw the lack of the ability to get good quality data. It's not their primary focus. It's really a supporting product for them. And they've made data available to customers. That said, they provide just a kind of subset of data. They make it available only once a day and provide just daily summaries in CSV format. They don't provide a charting interface. They don't provide the ability to dynamically generate charts, to look at and visually analyze charts and historical charts, as well as to save charts and share charts. We make this, the charting interface available. We provide an API both with JSON and CSV format. And pulling back to the charting interface, you can view hourly and daily data time periods for the data sets that we provide at the moment. Our API also provides fine-grained data per block. So in addition to hourly and daily data, if you plug into the API, you can get time series data that's on a per block basis. So we provide substantially more granularity and a richer interface and API, a direct API to access this data. A couple other questions here that I'll definitely make sure to get to everyone's question. Let's see, Montes Pavelai asked what Swatt's valuation is. That's something I'm happy to talk with you in private. You feel free to reach out to me. And for everybody who's here, my email is marshall@swatt.com, Marshall with 2 L's, at Swatt with 2 T's.com. The next question is, how soon will the upcoming interface be available? Well, we've had the interface and UI available for a month now. We're rolling out new features on at least every 2 weeks, if not every week. So the new release that we're working on is scheduled to come out next Wednesday. And it's going to have a number of new features. One of which I forgot to tell you or show you guys. So we have this chart builder that shows you. Let me see if I can pull up the right view here. So we have a chart builder that shows multiple axes separated out. But one of the new features we'll be adding is the ability to combine axes into a single chart so that you can see the relative differences between certain metrics. So you can easily compare and contrast them based on them in the most appropriate manner. Obviously, certain metrics can be wildly different numerically, and that's why in most cases, the ability to separate the axes and overlay them directly is much more friendly or provides a much better visual interface. But then again, in other cases, you may want to be able to use a single axis to directly show the comparisons between, in this case, transaction counts and raw transaction activity on these networks. Well, let's see, another question from Ang Ong is, how do you get your exchange data? Are you getting it from exchanges directly? And if so, what is your latency? Yes, we are sourcing exchange data directly. I don't have, we have stats on the latency, but I don't know offhand what those stats are. It's something I can get to if you'd like. Our focus, you know, we will provide both historical and real-time data to customers. So, you know, we intend to provide a low latency feed to customers that want real-time market data. But, you know, in some cases, it still may not be as fast as connecting directly to the exchange. But the benefit that you get is if we have it data across a number of exchanges, it saves you the work of having to integrate individually with all of them. So I think I got to all the questions that I see here so far. Does anybody have any other questions? You know, you're certainly, please feel free. Happy to answer any now that we have the time here. Is our API REST only, or do we have a fixed API? We currently offer a RESTful API only, but you know, I have, and my team has built fixed APIs in the past. It's something that we are very open to building, you know, based on customer demand. So we're happy to talk with you more about that. One thing I haven't mentioned relates to our pricing structure. I may have touched on it at the beginning of the talk, but we offer a freemium pricing structure. So, you know, if you sign up today, you get access to 3 of our blockchains by default and about a year's history of those blockchains, as well as all the metrics available for those 3 blockchains. That's a free tier, so you're welcome to use that and work with that data. And then individual tiers give customers access to all the different blockchains that we have, as well as additional history. And we cap rates or usage rates at credits per month. So we provide a tier of 100,000 call credits per month. That tier starts at $100 a month. And then we have an enterprise tier for customers that want to be able to get access to full data histories, and they want to be able to make more significant calls to the API. And the enterprise tier starts at $1,000 a month. What we're doing right now is offering early release promotional tier packages to customers, both at the individual tier and the institutional tier. So anybody who comes in and signs up now, they will get, you know, they will be granted in over the next 2 years. So even if our prices change, their subscription fees stay the same. If we add new data sets, they automatically get access to those new data sets without incurring additional fees. So it's a great promotion. We're happy to offer it and make it available to you guys now. And you know, for anybody that is interested, again, please feel free to reach out to me directly via email at marshall@swatt.com. Otherwise, when you log into the website, if you find that you're logged in, you'll see a link that says, please upgrade my account. Here it says get access, but when you're logged in, it'll be an upgrade link. If you click on that link, we'll also get in touch with you right away and talk with you about upgrading your plan. Does anybody else have any more questions? All right, we're at about 40 minutes on here. I see Robert raise his hand. Let's see. Feel free to type in your question via the chat interface, Robert. I can see all the questions that are typed in there. There should be an option when you're on the Zoom meeting menu. There's a more link. And when you click on more, it'll display a drop-down menu with chat at the very top. And that should make it easy for you to enter a question. Oh, great. Okay, yeah, sure. Happy to talk with you, Robert, separately. We've got, let's see, we've still got 15 people on the call here. But if no one has any other questions, I'm happy to end the webinar. And certainly feel free to play around. If you have any trouble getting access to the application, please let me know. I'm happy to help you out. We'll provide customer support. And if you have any questions about getting access to additional data sets and you want to upgrade to another tier, by all means, get in touch. We're happy to set you up. with that, I think I'll wrap it for today. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending the webinar. My name is Marshall Swatt, and this is Swatt Data.